Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Mets Daily on the Fan Arts Network. John Saponaro here with you today and every day to talk about our New York Mets. But of course, before we get started, a quick shout out goes to our friends over at Kalshi for sponsoring the video for a limited time. Use the code FANARTSBASEBALL on the Kalshi app to get $10 when you trade 10. So, a little bit of a quiet time here in the baseball world, of course. The All-Star break means that the league can sort of just take a breather. Just take a moment to exhale. And of course, as New York Mets fans, we needed that more than anybody else. You could argue that the team needed it, and I would say that the fan base needed this break even more so than the players. Maybe not from a physical standpoint, although I'm sure some would argue that, but certainly from a mental standpoint. But last night, the MLB All-Star Game did take place. Juan Soto, of course, the sole representative of the New York Mets on the NL All-Star squad. He was voted in by the fans, which means he was a starting player. I don't love the way that process works. I think it should be more merit-based and less popularity-based, but I understand they want to get folks involved. They want to get fans to have their voices heard, whatever. Bottom line is, Juan Soto deserved to be an All-Star in 2025. He deserved to be an All-Star again in 2026. It was a snub of the highest order last year when he wasn't even named as a backup. He wasn't even a replacement guy. He wasn't a coach's pick, none of that. So it was nice to see him be out there with the squad, especially with the way this Mets season has gone. If there was a all-star snub for Juan Soto with the numbers that he's putting up and the year that he's having, it would have just been another just kick in the pants that you just don't want to deal with. So does it matter to me? No. Does it matter to you? No. The Mets fan, the average Mets fan doesn't care. I get that. Juan Soto cares. Looks good on the resume. I'm sure he has some kind of, incentives and bonuses in his contracts or whatever for things like this, all-star appearances and awards won and all of that stuff. So for him, he deserved it, and I'm happy he had it. I'm happy he had the moment, got 2 at-bats. It's a little bit of a bummer that somebody like Luke Weaver didn't make the All-Star team, but at the same time, pitchers are all chosen. It's based on availability. It's based on when they last pitched. It's based on their decision, whether or not they want to accept it, a la Zach Wheeler, who felt personally slighted. And a lot of times, middle relief pitchers are the ones who sort of get left out in the cold. Now, yeah, I know Luke Weaver's a guy who pitches in leverage, but he's not a closer. And usually those honors for the relief pitchers go to closers. Although when a guy is having an exceptional year or an exceptional half of the year, the way Luke Weaver is and has been, sometimes that person is kind of given a special acknowledgement by making the All-Star team. So the Mets really should have had 2 representatives, but I'm not going to split hairs too much because I'll be honest with you guys, I have not watched the All-Star game in a long time. I have not voted in the All-Star game in a long time. I think it's a fun little event. I understand why kids like it. I understand why leagues do it. I don't much care for it. I don't know what it is. I used to love the home run derby. I used to love the All-Star game. And now maybe it's just because I'm older and I have other stuff to do. Maybe it's because I make Mets content 5 days a week, 6 times a week that, yeah, I mentioned the break for the fans, the mental break for the fans. I'm still here doing shows, but the mental break of not having to sit down and watch baseball and set my alarm for it and, set my clock to it is kind of nice. So I've not been a fan, a sit down and watch every inning of the All-Star game fan for as long as I can remember, but I'm happy for the folks who are, and I'm happy for the players who get that accolade and that notch on their belt, especially players who are getting it for the first time, players who are, maybe a bit of a journeyman player who get that nod for the first time, especially for those guys, it is well-deserved. And of course, Juan Soto not making his first All-Star game period, but his first All-Star game as a Met. He hit second in the lineup. He had 2 at-bats, like I said earlier. He got 1 hit, so 1 for 2 officially, in what was a pretty ho-hum game, 4-0 win by the American League. Soto, like I said, collects that 1 hit. Christopher Sanchez, who's had a terrific year, started the game, for the Phillies in his home, or excuse me, in his home ballpark for the NL, and was not good. 1 inning pitched, 3 runs, 2 walks, 2 strikeouts. And that was basically the difference in the game right there. The only run scored in this game, 3 runs by the AL in the first, and then 1 run in the AL in the eighth. And that was all of the runs. Lots of zeros on the sheet. So in that sense, kind of a weird all-star game, because usually numbers get put up a little bit better than that. Usually, they're just, and I didn't go back through all of the all-star games to substantiate that. It just feels like at some point, these teams are so good and they're so stacked and there's so many superstars. If somebody runs into a home run, you try to avoid the shutout. 4-2 is even more likely, it feels like, than 4-0. But I digress. Sanchez was bad. Cody Bellinger was good enough anyway in a low-scoring game where there was only 10 total hits. He knocks in 2 runs in the first inning, and he is your all-star game MVP. Ben Rice, another all-star for the New York Yankees, knocked in a run later on, and so 3 of the 4 runs go the way of the New York Yankees, or at least come from New York Yankees. But the all-star game is in the rearview mirror, so as of today, we've got one more day to just kind of relax and reset before the unofficial start of the second half of Major League Baseball. And that said, I want to take a moment to talk about something that we've talked about a couple of times already, and I don't want to be a broken record. I swear. I said it the first time, and I said it on the follow-up occasion, and I'll say it again. I don't want to talk about this, but because it's becoming a topic of conversation, I have to talk about it because I do this show and because I do Till Mets do his part, and it is going to become something that, as it takes on a life of its own, it needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed across the Mets sphere. And if you're going to be a content creator in the Mets space like I am, you just kind of have to talk about it. But the Mets cannot, will not, and should not trade Francisco Lindor. I have a lot of respect for Mike Francesa and what his career has been. Him mentioning this does not a report make, I guess. Rumor, sure. Opinion, definitely. I'm sure he's hearing something from somebody that makes him want to say this, but I find it irresponsible from anybody who is reporting this and running with it. Now you have people at the New York Post talking about it, and you have, beat reporters now who cover the Mets and are in the clubhouses that have to also, like me, they're not reporting it. Max Goodman, who covers the Mets, he put out an article about it, basically just saying, I'm just weighing the pros and the cons of doing it. But he shouldn't have to do that because, again, now this thing is taken on a life of its own. So I just want to remind folks really quickly, it is my firm belief that Francisco Lindor is not going anywhere. But I want to start with the should not portion of this. Francisco Lindor is a consummate pro. Francisco Lindor is a star. Francisco Lindor is a true two-way player. Francisco Lindor is the best shortstop in the history of the New York Mets franchise. Francisco Lindor is likely going to be in the Hall of Fame. His number 12 will be up on the wall at Citi Field, and he will go into the Hall of Fame wearing a New York Mets cap. And when you are the New York Mets and you have just Tom Seaver, Mike Piazza, Carlos Beltran, you don't have a lot of folks that you're like, wow, look at the lineage of all-time Mets players wearing Mets caps in the Hall of Fame. So I don't think that we should be so quick to dismiss and throw one out and cast one aside, especially because this one is being done in the name of past mistakes, or what's being perceived as past mistakes. Mets fans are sitting there and saying, we should have never gotten rid of Pete Alonso or Brandon Nimmo. And then they'll turn around and in the next breath say, but we have to get rid of Francisco Lindor because he's old now. It doesn't make any sense. Francisco Lindor is a better player than Brandon Nimmo. Today, tomorrow, yesterday, last week, last month, last year, 5 years ago. And you take that same thought process and you can say it about Francisco Lindor being a better player than Pete Alonso. So you're so quick to not want to get rid of these guys, whether that was the right choice or the wrong choice. But then you're going to turn around and say, let's get rid of this guy who's objectively better, who plays an harder position, it's also a harder position to fill, and it's a more valuable position. I don't understand where this logic comes. Lest you forget that in 2024, the miracle run that the Mets went on does not happen without Francisco Lindor, period. He carried the team. He saved the season. Before Pete Alonso ever had the opportunity to save the season off Devin Williams in the playoffs, Francisco Lindor needed to do it first. He carried that team on his back and willed them to a playoff. He's gone 30-30 twice. He just missed another time going 30-30. I don't know where you think you're going to find this production. Is he slowing down? I don't know, probably. This has been a weird, wonky year. But people are telling me on Twitter that he's injury prone. Francisco Lindor has had 2 major injuries that cost him time and productivity. One came in his first season with the Mets, and one came this year. It sucks. Is it a sign that Father Time is catching up to him? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not a doctor. I've never examined Francisco Lindor. I don't know. Anything can happen. Could it be true? It could be. But there's nothing in his history as a ball player, as a professional. There's nothing in his history as a Met that would suggest that that's the case. It's just a wonky year where stuff went wrong for him. People want to call out the numbers. What about the numbers when he has played? He's played like 40 games. 40 games does not a season make. He can come out on the first Mets game back this weekend. He can go 5 for 5. He'll raise his average like 70 points. 40 games is nothing. Batting average isn't the be-all, end-all, but you see what I'm saying? It's like, it's such a small sample size that I don't understand where you could sit there and even say, it's been bad. It's been nothing. The worst part about it is that he hasn't played. And if you remember, he didn't get a spring training, not really, because of the hamate bone. And he willed his way back the way he always does, to be out there for the Mets, to be with the team, to be a leader on opening day. He was there against the odds. He did it. He was getting off to a little bit of a slow start, as he usually does. And as soon as he was starting to heat up, as soon as the Lindor thing was about to, the switch was about to flip, he gets hurt and he misses 2 months. Has a little bit of a short stint in rehab, and he comes back because, again, the team needs him and he wants to be back. And he has to restart again after not having a spring training. He essentially doesn't have a second spring training. So, no, they shouldn't. The other part of the reason why they shouldn't and they won't is because shortstops are hard to find. Look around in the Mets system, who else plays shortstop? You're not going to be happy with the results. I don't want to hear about Elian Pena. I don't want to hear about Juan Diaz-Segan. These are children. Literal children. They also listen, I think Elian Pena especially is the real deal. I think he's going to hit. But he's young, he's far away. And he may not be, even if he does hit, he may not stick at shortstop. We don't know. It's so far away. And then you look at the options to play shortstop in free agency. Mauricio Dubon, Hassan Kim. I mean, guys, you don't want that as an option. You want Francisco Lindor. And you're not going to trade for another team shortstop. You know why? Teams don't trade really good shortstops. You're not going to be able to do it. And I like Bo Bichette, and I've said that Bo Bichette should be back on this team, and Bo Bichette should be a part of this team, not only in 2027, but I think beyond that, because I think he's an important part. I think he's the perfect offensive fit. I would love to see him be with the Mets beyond this season, let's just put it that way. And I think he did an admirable job sliding over on the fly after Lindor and then Mauricio got hurt, playing shortstop every day. But he's not a good shortstop. He filled in adequately, but he's not good at it. You shouldn't be like, oh, just put Bo Bichette there. That's another thing people are saying to me on Twitter. Just put Bo Bichette. Also, you don't even know if Bo Bichette, I want him to, but you don't even know if he's going to opt in. So what is the thought process? It's a bird in the hand scenario. The hate that Lindor is getting is insane. And quite frankly, it's asinine. It's misguided, it's misdirected, and it's rooted in things that I think have nothing to do with baseball that I'm not even going to specifically address on this show because I don't even want to lend credence to them. People are mad because he went like this. Grow up. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous thing to be mad about. Absolutely an insane thing to be mad about. And just for the last bit, the can't part of this thing. Francisco Lindor has like 5 years, $155 million left, or $160 million, whatever, somewhere in that ballpark. There are so few teams that can afford to take that contract on. One of them is already the Mets. So scratch one off the list. Now, I don't think this group of Mets ownership, this Mets brass, has the same feeling that the Wilpons had, where they won't trade with the Yankees and they won't trade with, teams that they're considered rivals with. I don't think this, and for the better, I don't think this group feels that way. But you think with the season the Mets have had and the terrible PR that the Mets have had, I've seen people on Twitter suggest to me that the Mets need to trade Francisco Lindor to the Yankees because the Yankees need a shortstop. You think with this PR nightmare, the Mets are going to trade Francisco Lindor to the Yankees in season so that they can go win a division and maybe go win a World Series and have a parade down the Canyon of Heroes? Now, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but like the picture I'm painting for you, do you realize how absurd that is? Even pick the team out here in Los Angeles where I live. That's the other one. Oh, the Mets should trade him to the Dodgers. Dodgers could use him. They move people around. Then they have a real shortstop, blah, 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 blah. Steve Cohen came in here talking about trying to be the Dodgers East. Now he's going to help the Dodgers win a third World Series in a row with your guy after Edwin Diaz goes there. Guys, it's so unrealistic. It's so unrealistic by every conceivable metric that it's not worth talking about. But here I am for the third time in like 2 weeks talking about it. And I guess, and this will be the last time I talk about this topic, and I think it's only reared its head just because of the aggravation that I've seen on Twitter. First time it was born out of the Francesa thing, and then it was born out of the, Joel Sherman and John Heyman running with stuff, whatever. This time is born purely because John Saponaro has just been on Twitter too much the last 2 days. And I'm just tired of hearing about it. Lindor ain't going anywhere, and he shouldn't. And you should be happy about that. And if you're not, you need to look yourself in the face, in the mirror, and understand why you're not. As Mets fans, we used to dream under the Wilpons. We used to dream. We used to pray. We used to hope. We used to wish. We used to cross our fingers to get players like Francisco Lindor. Now, get him out of here. He's not good. It's all rumor. It's nonsense. It's off the field. It's made up. It's fabricated. And I don't like it. Like I said before, it's insane. And quite frankly, I think it's asinine. Baseball season is here, and now you can trade every game on Kalshi. You know what I do. I sit down to record this show, but before I do, I pop on over to the Kalshi app. I take a look and see where I can find some interesting value. And with no games going on, I wasn't sure exactly where to go. So I just typed in Juan Soto's name. And I just want to look at Juan Soto's odds to win NL MVP. And you're not going to be super surprised to find out that the favorite is Shohei Ohtani, and he probably will win. But what I saw was a bit surprising in that Soto's the third name on the list, third highest chances percentage. But it's only at 3 cents a share. 3, which is roughly 3%. And I don't know if Soto's going to win the MVP. He probably won't. But that is too low. It's just too low because he can win the MVP. Right now, he's second in on-base percentage, slugging, and OPS in the National League. Home runs, he's seventh. He did miss, about 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks. RBI, he's all the way down 26th, but he has over 50, which he's on pace for around 100. Again, he missed those 2+ weeks. So those numbers are going to be a bit down. He could do it. Do I think he's going to? I don't think he probably will. But if you've got a little bit extra latte money, some pizza money sitting around, $100 will get you ready for this? $3,121. So you've got a little pizza money lying around. You reach into the couch cushions and you find some stuff. Maybe you say, you know what? This Mets team is frustrating, but Juan Soto's great. Juan Soto's got the all-star appearance. Juan Soto's looking good. He's feeling good. Put the team on his back, even in an empty season, and maybe he goes on a run. Maybe this Ohtani thing being banged up. I don't know. Stranger things have happened. Anyway, on Kalshi, you're trading against peers in a live market, meaning there is no house. And as the probability changes, you can buy into and out of your position. For a limited time, download the Kalshi app and use the code FANARCHBASEBALL to get $10 when you trade 10. Kalshi, trade on anything. Must be 18 and over. Restrictions and eligibility requirements apply. Event contract trading involves risks and may not be suitable for all investors. Prices, values, and available markets may differ from those mentioned. For more information, see kalshi.com/regulatory. I thought we'd jump back in and talk about the midseason grades because I had a lot of fun doing it yesterday about the players, the position groups. And I thought we left out two glaring areas, and that is the coaching staff, which includes the manager, and the entirety of the front office. And I know what you're thinking. If you're seeing me do this, you're like, John, why bother? I mean, that's our two biggest beefs, right? As Mets fans, that's the two biggest issues we have in general is where a lot of this blame has fallen on. And I agree. So we're not going to spend a ton of time on it. But I did want to kind of just take an overarching view for a moment and say this. And I'll let this segment bleed right into the next one, our final segment of the day. Front office gets an F. The front office really has not had many things hit for them dating back to the trade deadline last season. The process was good. The thought process made sense. The reason, the logic, all of that. But the results were not there. I've said oftentimes on this show, all you can do as a fan, all you can do as an outsider, which we all are, including myself, is you follow point A to point B. Does it make sense? That's all you can judge. And a lot of those moves at the deadline last year made sense. They just didn't work. That sucks. In the offseason, we're not talking about the trade deadline last year. We're only talking about the start of this season on. So the offseason into where we've been so far. I've agreed with some of the moves. I've not agreed with others. I followed the logic for most of them. I've not followed the logic for all of them. But the front office has just been bad. They just have to execute better. And remember, when you're talking about the front office, it's not just letting Pete Alonso walk. It's not just signing Jorge Polanco, who's oft injured, to a multi-year deal. It's not just that. It's rostering Vidal Brujan. It's sending down Zach Thornton when you could have had him make a start instead of, this awful bullpen game where you ran out Kodai Senga and he got bombed because he was on 3 days rest trying to go in a bulk roll. There's just too many things that they should be getting right that they're not getting right. Oh, we won't put this guy on the IL, so we're going to play basically a man down for 7 days. Like, that's insane. That's the front office. That's not all on David Stearns. Now, he'll say it's him because he's the guy who's in charge and he makes the big bucks and the buck stops with him and all of that stuff is true. But just, there's a lot of smart people. There's a lot of talented people, and I'm going to keep banging that drum in this front office. But I get, for those of you who don't see it, I understand why. Because there's been more confounding moves made by this team than I thought I could ever conceive of with a front office run by David Stern. So they get an F, full stop. The coaches, I waffled on this a little bit. I thought I was going to give the coaching staff an F too, because they've not gotten the most out of their pitchers. They've not gotten the most out of their offense. They brought in Kai Correa to be the bench coach, who's supposed to be a defensive guru. The defense has been slightly better than last year, but in big spots, it's been bad. Carlos Mendoza's already been fired. He was horrible anyway. But I didn't give him an F. I gave him a D-, which isn't much better. But there's been a couple things that they can hang their hat on and that they should hang their hats on. Most notably, and we've talked about this before, Carson Benj was very bad for a little over a month, hitting under 200, making weak contact, being beat on fastballs. The coaching staff identified something in his swing. They went to him. They worked with him. He was able, again, to his credit, implement it. He didn't have to go down to the minors to work on it. He was learning the major leagues, and he was working on this simultaneously, and he gets a ton of credit for that, and he should. And ultimately, all the credit goes to Carson Benj for making it work. But I have to give some credit to the coaches who identified it and who helped him and who were there for him and who taught him and worked with him through it, because it ain't easy to learn on the fly in the major leagues when you're a 24-year-old rookie. And speaking of rookies, AJ Ewing has come up here and he has not missed a beat. AJ Ewing has been the same type of player that he was in the minor leagues that got him here. And sometimes guys come up to the big leagues and the lights are bright and they shrink. He has not shrunk. He has been the same guy. And I got to give some credit, of course, to AJ Ewing. Maybe he's just got ice in his veins. Maybe he's a bright lights guy and that's just what it is. But the coaching staff does get a little credit for him too. And I got to give the coaching staff credit for some tiny things like, Bo Bichette being a near elite third baseman in terms of defense. I mean, there were Mets content creators everywhere telling you that he wasn't going to be able to play defense at third base and he was going to either be playing second base or be the full-time DH by May. They said 1 month in, he'd be off at third base because he wouldn't be able to do it. Again, credit goes to Bo Bichette. The athlete, the work ethic, of course. Somebody had to coach him. So you might not like that one, but I think the front office gets an F, well-deserved F, a giant one, written in Sharpie. And I think while the coaching staff has been bad and they deserve a ton of criticism, and when you fire the manager midseason and you lose 12 games in a row and you're underperforming this badly, it's hard to give them anything but an F. But I think there's a couple of things there that bump it up one tiny little notch. And the last thing I'll say, and we'll get out of here pretty quick. This trade deadline, as I thought about it, is in a way make or break for David Stearns. I think this trade deadline could define his entire tenure as New York Mets president of baseball operations, in the sense that I don't know if he's even going to be president of baseball operations if this trade deadline doesn't work out. And look, I know on the surface, the Mets are trading major league players. They're going to get mostly prospects back. We won't know about those prospects for several years. So how could we say if David Stearns gets fired next year, but then all of the, so many of these prospects pan out, or the Mets are able to trade them and get better players? Oh, did it all work out? I don't mean it from that perspective, because we won't know about some of these prospects for a couple of years. I get that. It's the types of trades that David Stearns can make that I think is going to be the defining thing. Because, again, like it or not, we've talked about it before, like the Francisco Lindor situation, Stearns is here for 2027. Just deal with it. Whatever you got to do. Strap in, buckle up, whatever. But the Mets need to, it's how they free up money through trades so that they could spend money elsewhere. They don't need to free up money. It doesn't matter. They have tons of money. But they don't want to have dead money. They don't have useless money. They don't have Frankie Montas money like they do this year. They don't have Kodai Senga on the roster again, paying him $15 million to be whatever he is. So it's how they free up that money, but more so those roster spots for 2027. Can they acquire a player or players that might help them in 2027? So either a prospect that is in AAA right now that you could see making the major leagues right out of the gate the way Carson Bench did, or shortly thereafter the way AJ Ewing did? Or do they get a player that's under contract for 2027, maybe even 2028, where they trade for him now and it's sort of like a soft buy? They know they're not going anywhere, but they know they have that player for next year too. A lot's been made about, maybe one of the pitchers from Seattle. The Mets line up really well with Seattle, or theoretically match up well with Seattle in terms of need. And Seattle has a lot of starting pitching they could deal if they wanted to. They have an embarrassment of riches with starting pitching. So, whether that's taking on some salary like Luis Castillo, or if it's going out and trying to get a guy who's closer to free agency, who's younger, who's better, that Seattle's not going to pay and they're going to have to pay him in a year anyway, like George Kirby or something like that. Could the Mets do something like that? I don't know. I don't know if they can. I don't know if those players are truly available. But that's another definitive career kind of defining move that Stearns may or may not be able to make. The last two are, would the Mets be willing to eat money like they were in 2023, acknowledging sunk costs? And I think they will. And that's more of a Cohen thing than a Stearns thing. But then Stearns has to execute the deal. Because so much was made about the return that the Mets were able to get for Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer because Steve Cohen was able to eat money, willing to eat money. They didn't really get anything back, guys. Realistically, maybe Ryan Clifford is the first baseman of the future. Maybe not. Maybe he's a bench bat. Maybe he's a DH. I don't know. But, Ryan Clifford is trending to be a very aggressive 3 true outcome player, which has a lot of value. But, you've got to hit a lot of home runs if all you're going to do is hit home runs, walk, and strike out. Your on-base percentage has to be close to 400. Your home run totals has to be minimum of 30. Because if you're going to strike out, 30% of the time, then, or more in some cases, then you have to be able to do that other stuff at a really high level too. And I don't know if he can. Maybe he can, maybe he does. But, Luis Angel Acuna ain't here anymore. Drew Gilbert's not here anymore. The Mets got back prospects they were able to flip, sure. But they didn't get back a ton in terms of actual, tangible, real value. So if the Mets are willing to eat money and acknowledge sunk costs, great. But what do you get off of that? And I think the Mets will be willing to eat money in terms of this season. This season, it's already accounted for. They already did the books. Boom, boom, boom. They signed the checks. I don't think Steve Cohen cares about picking up an extra $5 million here, $6 million there to get a better prospect back. But it's a question of if they can trade a guy like Kodai Senga, who has $15 million on the books next year, would they eat any of that to trade him? If they could, I think this is less likely, but trade Jorge Polanco, who makes $20 million next year, would they be willing to pay that down to 15 or to 10 so that a team who wants offense and doesn't want to spend a ton of money like Seattle or like Tampa, they make that a little bit more enticing for them? That's what I want to see. And then the last thing is just quality versus quantity. I want to see if Stearns leans this, get us one big guy back per trade, or give us a few. Let's try to replenish the farm system. The perfect example is for somebody like Luke Weaver. Luke Weaver is going to be pretty valuable at this deadline because of what he's been doing and because he's a reliever with closer experience and all that stuff, leverage, blah, 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 New York, playoffs, the whole nine. If you're the Mets, do you get back, 2 prospects that are okay? Or do you just say, no, we want that guy? That's the question. And ultimately, I think those decisions that are made are going to go a long way in defining David Stern's tenure as president of baseball operations, because fairly or unfairly, quickly or long term, I think some of those things are going to show us not whether or not the prospects pan out, because again, that might come 4 years from now, and David Stearns might have a bad year next year and be fired anyway, and it wouldn't have mattered. But I think it's his time to show us that he really does know what he's doing, and he can evaluate this talent, and he can do it here in New York. He's fallen on his face a couple times, but this thing he should be good at. This doesn't really concern market size. This doesn't concern, can you play in a place like New York City? This doesn't really concern that. Not right now. This is evaluate talent, identify players, get them. Can he do it? I guess we'll find out. That's going to do it for this episode of Mets Daily. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. We're sitting at just over 4,000 subscribers, and we would love to get to 5,000. And more importantly than that, we would love for you to be a part of it. Until next time, I'm John Saponaro. See you tomorrow.